Nick and Jacob, ages 32 and 29, are African American brothers who have a very close relationship. Growing up, they were often considered bad as hell, were noticeably too much for their mother to handle. But they had an older cousin, Trisha, who had always showed them love and looked out for them whenever she could. In reality, Trisha was more like a big sister than a cousin. And because of that, the boys loved her with all their hearts and were willing to do anything for Trisha, anything she asked. They were more loyal to Trisha than their own mother. One night in December, Trisha was coming home from a Christmas party and was struck by a drunk driver and killed instantly. When the brothers found out about the fatal accident, they were devastated by the news. Following the loss of Trisha, Nick experienced a major depressive episode, while Jacob began a process of grieving without depression. The experience of going through the loss of a relationship, loss of something valuable, or losing a loved one can be extremely challenging for a lot of us. In situations like this, we often experience depression or grief or both. Most people going through a loss find it easiest just to describe themselves as feeling depressed. But what's the difference between grief and depression? First, let me tell you how they're similar. The grieving process is a natural process and it's a personal journey. Aspects of the journey can look similar to symptoms of depression. Grief and depression may both involve a withdrawal from usual activities and the presence of an intense sadness. However, there are three major differences. So number one, during grief, painful emotions tend to come and go in waves and are often accompanied by positive memories of the deceased. In major depression, there is a major decrease in mood and or interest or pleasure, lasting for most of the day in a 2-week period. So imagine grief, the difficult relative, stopping by your home unannounced, here and there, for an undetermined period of time. And depression, unrelated, unwelcome, disrespectful visitor coming to sleep in your home 2 weeks at a time. Number two, while grieving individuals generally maintain their self-esteem and can compartmentalize their emotional pain, in major depression, overall feelings of worthlessness and self-hatred are commonly experienced. In layman's terms, people can seem to hold themselves together a little bit better when they are grieving compared to depression. A depressive episode can seem like a person has hit rock bottom and has become completely unable to function normally. Number three, in grief, thoughts of death may come up when thinking about or fantasizing about joining the loved one who passed away. Major depression, thoughts revolve around ending one's life due to feelings of worthlessness, the belief of being undeserving of living, or the inability to cope with the pain of depression. Now, suicidal thoughts do not have to exist in order for a person to have a major depressive episode. Recognizing the differences between grief and depression is crucial, as it can help individuals seek the necessary help, support, or treatment they require. Let's get back to the story. So, a year after the untimely loss of Trisha, Jacob continued feeling like a part of himself had died. He felt alone and detached from others, even Nick, who he had usually shared all of his feelings with. Jacob even had problems engaging with friends. He would just ghost them or become very defensive and irritable. He stopped working on his music and gave up on his dreams of starting a record label. He was at a point where he couldn't plan a meal to eat, let alone his future. This period of grief lasted longer than what might be expected based on Jacob's social, cultural, and religious norms. Throughout that same year following Trisha's death, Nick had 3 additional depressive episodes, which were 2-week periods of time where Nick heavily considered how it would be to end his life, but he never created a plan. During that same time, Nick would have very intense feelings of sadness, and he would lose interest in activities he had previously loved. He also experienced weight loss unrelated to dieting. Nick couldn't get much sleep during those 2-week periods of time and often felt like thoughts were racing through his head, preventing him from recharging his battery. He felt completely drained and worthless most days. Now, because medical conditions like vitamin deficiencies, thyroid problems, or brain tumors can mimic symptoms of depression, Nick and Jacob decided to see their primary care doctors so they could rule out general medical causes. Now, both of their doctors referred them to a psychotherapist for talk therapy and to a psychiatrist for medication to help manage their symptoms. Although the brothers were hesitant to open up to a stranger, they decided to give the talk therapy a try. They're hearing about benefits from people they trusted. Now, after an initial intake session and the completion of a thorough biological, psychological, and social assessment by their licensed therapist, Nick was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, and Jacob was diagnosed with prolonged grief disorder. Through their consistent, meaningful participation in individual therapy, they both have been able to find healthy ways to grieve the loss of Trisha, create unique ways to celebrate her life and make meaning of her death, and to handle the full variety of life's emotions. I like to add that grief and depression can coexist. When grief and depression are happening at the same time, the symptoms tend to be more severe and prolonged or exaggerated compared to grief without depression. Interestingly enough, the most recent addition to the DSM, or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is a condition known as prolonged grief disorder. Perhaps this will help practitioners reduce their confusion between extensive grief and major depression. As we wrap up this video, it's crucial to acknowledge the complexity of the topics we've discussed, grief and depression. Both are powerful emotions that can profoundly affect our lives, but they are distinct experiences that require understanding and compassion. If you're struggling with grief, remember that it's essential to give yourself time and space to mourn. Surround yourself with supportive friends, family, or seek out professional counseling if needed. Remember that healing is a personal journey and there's no one-size-fits-all solution. If you suspect you may be dealing with depression, don't hesitate to reach out for help. Mental health professionals are trained to provide support and guidance. It's important to remember that seeking help is a sign of strength, and you deserve the care and support necessary to overcome this challenge. Thank you for watching this episode of Jawann Talks, and remember, you are valued, you are loved, and your feelings matter. Peace and love.